Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Barth, the director of the Clinton Presidential Library and Museum, and I want to welcome you, as always, to the Clinton Presidential Center and to another event in our Off the Record series. And this speaker series brings Clinton White House alumni to Little Rock to offer never-before-heard stories about their time in the White House. Off the Record is co-sponsored by the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Presidential Library, and we at the Presidential Library are really thrilled to co-sponsor this series because while we have all the papers and the emails and the audio-visual materials of the Clinton White House years, we know it really is the human beings behind those records that have lost stories or stories that could be lost that need to be told about the decisions expressed in those records. With every off-the-record visitor, we're at the Clinton Library, we're going to create a new staff spotlight entry on our website that tells a bit more about the staff member and their work, but also links to the records from our collection. I think the QR code will be up here in just a second. Minyon Moore came to the White House for the second term after distinguishing herself in the areas of voter education, coalition building, and community outreach at the Democratic National Committee. At the DNC, she served as political director and constituency and outreach director. Before her time at the DNC, Minyon worked in Jesse Jackson's 1984 and 1988 presidential campaigns, and then with Michael Dukakis on his 1988 general election campaign. Minyon served the Clinton administration in various roles in the offices of political affairs and public liaison, ultimately directing both of those offices. As director of the White House Office of Political Affairs, she served as the principal political advisor to the president, the vice president, the first lady, and senior White House staff with primary responsibility for planning outreach and directing the political activities of the White House. And as director of the White House Office of Public Liaison, Minyon served as the administration's principal intermediary to non-governmental organizations and constituencies. During her service in the Clinton White House, Minyon Moore was an active member of the task force that helped develop the president's initiative on race and was a leading force behind that initiative. After leaving the White House, of course, Minyon stayed deeply involved in the matters she cares so deeply about. She was appointed to serve as chair, ultimately, of the 2024 Democratic National Convention, held in August of 2024 in her hometown of Chicago, where she oversaw the planning and execution of what ultimately was the nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. Of course, that was an interesting story, as we will talk about a little bit this evening. Currently, Minyon leads Dewey Square Group's state and local affairs and multicultural strategies practices with clients ranging from the Fortune 100 to startup nonprofits seeking counsel for developing strategies that address emerging consumer markets and achieving their public policy goals. She specialized in building coalitions and brand awareness strategies for corporations while at the same time effectively addressing their state and local public policy issues. In conversation tonight with Minyon will be her friend and her White House colleague and the executive director of the Clinton Foundation. Please welcome Stephanie Streett to get this Off the Record with Minyon Moore underway.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Jay. It's always a great pleasure to be here with Jay, who's my counterpart here at the National Archives, and he is such a great partner, and we're so fortunate to have him in the role as library director. So appreciate you, Jay. I also want to say a special thank you to all of our Clinton Foundation staff. I think a lot of them are in the back of the room, and hopefully they're trying to fix the air conditioner right now. It's a little bit warm in here. The volunteers, as you know, we have the most incredible cohort of volunteers. Several are in here tonight. We could not do the work that we do without the volunteers. So really appreciative to our wonderful cohort of volunteers. And last but definitely not least, I want to say a special thank you to our Clinton Center members and our donors. Programs like this are only possible because of your ongoing support, and we're super grateful to you for that and excited about your partnership as we work on the exciting Clinton Center expansion. There will be much more to come on that, but deep thank you to everybody here. This is going to be so fun tonight. I wish we had like 3 hours because I don't know how we're going to do all this in 45 minutes or an hour because there's so much we could talk about.
We will try.
We will try. But I'm going to go way, way back to the beginning, and I want to hear a little bit, I know our audience would like to hear, about your start in presidential politics, working for Reverend Jackson. Can you tell us a little bit about your engagement with Rainbow Push and with Reverend Jackson, and then how it was to work on his presidential campaign?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. I mean, it's so hot outside. I was like, nobody's going to come out their house for this. So I really do appreciate seeing you, and obviously, I see so many of my friends here. I kind of fell into presidential politics. I didn't really see that as my journey. When I started off, especially going to college, I really thought I was going to be a doctor. And then I took myself to a hospital. I said, well, maybe I should volunteer a little bit and see what that's like. And while I love volunteering, I hated the sight of blood. So I'm like, that's not going to work. So I came out of that. And then one fateful Saturday, I went over to this organization it was called Operation Push at the time. And I went over there with my cousin, and I decided to just go and see what it was all about. And it was Reverend Jackson's organization. And there you had them talking about voter education, making sure that you get out and vote. And I said, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I should do that. And by that time, Harold Washington was coming on the scene. And so I was still in college, and I said, well, maybe I'll gather up some of my friends. They say go register people to vote. So what we did was we went and we decided we would go register young people to vote. And lo and behold, the young people became the margin of victory because we took it very, very seriously. And what I learned from that, I said, wow, if we can help elect a mayor, then this is really a powerful thing to do. And that's really how I got started. So I was really working for the young people in here, I was working for Encyclopedia Britannica. I was going to school at night, and then I was trying to volunteer on Saturdays and on the weekend at Reverend Jackson's organization. And then a lady by the name of Reverend Willie Barrow said to me, why don't you just leave that good paying job and come over here and work? And I was like, I wonder if I get health care at least. I was asking all kinds of questions that you don't ask at my age, but I was like, well, my mother and father can't afford to pay my rent, so I gotta at least get some basics. And so I quit my job, and I wouldn't work for his organization, and that's really how I got started, and I just took that leap of faith. And then when the president ran, David Wilhelm asked me to come to the DNC, so that's kind of started my journey.
I want to circle back to, because you also worked on the Dukakis-Benson campaign.
Yes.
And I had the opportunity to be the campus coordinator at the University of Arkansas for the Dukakis-Benson campaign, so we share that little link in common. But when you were here on your book tour a couple of years ago, Colored Girls, I call it the Colored Girls book, you told a story about that experience working on the Dukakis campaign and where the offices were and sort of how that all, can you tell that story here?
Yeah, what she's referencing, in campaigns there's hierarchy, as we all know, young people. Listen to me now.
Listen.
There's hierarchy. So it was a group of us, Susan Rice, General Clark, you don't know this Susan Rice. You don't know the flip-flop shorts Susan Rice. This is the Susan Rice I got to know. And so we were all in this office on the 3rd floor of the Dukakis-Benson campaign. And it was me, Donna Brazile, another group of women, Janice Thurman from South Carolina. And so they came to us and said, well, we need you all to move downstairs. And something went off in our head and said, well, if we move downstairs, then we're not going to be connected to the resources, we're not going to be connected to the money, we're not going to be connected to the policy, we're not going to be connected to anything. So faithful as they are, they went out for drinks. We decided to not take that office. We took another office. Lo and behold, it was the chairman's office. We didn't realize it was the chairman's office when we took it. And so we moved in a conference table, and then we put this sign up on the door and said, "Colored Girls Plus, we shall not be moved." And everybody started coming to the office. They never moved us. I guess they got scared because all of us just piled in that office. But it taught, again, we learned a very valuable lesson. You have to stand your ground and your principle. And we were doing a lot of important work. And we're like, well, if we go downstairs, we're going to be disconnected from everything. So we stayed, and the rest is history.
Yes, it is. I'd like to talk a little bit, if you could talk about how you first came to know President Clinton and Secretary Clinton. Were those different stories, different times? Go back a little bit and tell us about, if you can remember, the first time you all met, and then how you then came into the White House.
Well, this is, I actually met President Clinton at the Rainbow Push Conference. And it was during the Sister Soldier moment that I met him. And I don't know, Bob, I don't know if you were there. I know Rodney was there. And I tell you, one of the things that has never been told about that Sister Soldier moment, everybody wanted to make the president look like he was doing push-off politics. And some of that was happening. But in fact, the president stayed around that hotel, oh God, for hours, waiting for her to come back so that he could apologize. And the story, what happened, Sister Soldier had spoke at a panel. Reverend Jackson was good at bringing young people together, whether they were, you know, on the right message or the wrong message. She felt like they needed to be brought to the room. And at this time, a young woman named Sister Soldier, she had a song out, and it was disparaging about police. And so some on the Clinton side said, well, you know, you need to take that on if you go into the conference. And unfortunately, the president didn't have all the context. And so it became, you know, and this is just imagine what it would have been in the age of social media. Wow. Even during that time, it just became it just became a firestorm. And the president stayed around the hotel to actually apologize to her and say, you know, I understand now more of what you were doing. But unfortunately, she was on Michigan Avenue shopping. So she missed the apology, and by that time, the press had taken off on it.
Oh, yeah.
And it had just became a huge, huge deal. But what I learned about him that day was that he was a man of consciousness, and he was a man that when he knew a mistake, he was willing to own the mistake. But by the time the press had gotten to it, he was long gone, and the story started writing itself. And that's the story people never tell. Was the part where he was actually going to talk to her. And so that's how that's the first day I met him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what about Secretary Clinton? When
I
did
didn't
you
meet
first-
her till I started working at the White House.
Okay.
And, you know, as, you know, OPL director and as political director, I was working very closely with her and her staff. Yeah.
Well, let's go to the White House.
Okay.
Let's go back 30, oh my gosh, we're all so old. I see so many Clinton administration colleagues on the front row here, and I know there's a lot of them online watching us. We have a live stream of this, so hello to all of our friends watching. Oh, look at that fun picture. Look at that, we were so young.
I know.
And cute, yeah.
Look at all that paper.
Oh no, look at that. Oh, look at the president's face.
He's like, what are they
That is,
talking about?
okay, that is sort of an everyday occurrence.
Right.
This is Minyon's program, not mine, but I'll give you a little context. I got to meet with the president every single day to go over his schedule, any changes, what was happening the next week and the next. And, see what was going on. And I used to take people in with me sometimes if they had something, or when I needed somebody to help distract when I knew I had to deliver something unpleasant. So I'm assuming that previous picture with the mad face was me telling him something he didn't want to hear on the schedule, and then I'm sure Minyon said something that made him smile and laugh. So that's the second picture in that series. Look how young and cute we were, Minyon. What happened to us?
I don't know.
30-something years. Yeah.
Yes. Look at
Well,
the ponytail.
yeah. Minyon, tell us, okay, you are in a unique position because you served as an assistant to the president in two of the most important offices in the White House. Obviously, you were assistant to the president for political affairs and assistant to the president for the Office of Public Liaison, which I think now is called Public Engagement. Can you tell our folks here what those two offices did in the White House, who their constituents were, and what your primary role was in running those offices as the assistant to the president?
Well, I have to back up just a little bit because when I first came to the White House, I worked for Craig Smith, who is here today.
Yay,
And I was telling the archivist upstairs that I was so grateful that I had the opportunity to work for Craig because I did not know the president certainly as well as he did. And so it gave me an opportunity. By the time Craig decided he was done, at some point, Craig just said, "I'm out of here." I don't know why, but he left me there by myself. But he gave me such a great foundation because you cannot work for a president as an assistant to the president without knowing him. So having Craig, having Bob, having Carol Willis on the outside, but more importantly, my direct report was I was deputy assistant to the president first before I became, and I think Craig may have recommended that I take over once, because those jobs are very competitive. And so it was a great job, and as Craig knows, I mean, it's probably the best job in the White House because you get to be you. You don't have to pretend like you're partisan. You don't have to pretend like you're nonpartisan. You can actually take care of the president's supporters. And that's the primary job. And it's also to articulate what the president is doing. The first line of defense is to always have his base covered. So we spend an enormous amount of time making sure that the president, anytime that Air Force One lifted up off the ground, he was able to see people in various states. He was able to make sure he stayed connected. And, any of this front row can tell you that if you do anything right for the president, you keep him connected to the people he loved on the ground. And so political affairs was able to do that, and we were able to do it unabashedly. And I contend that is one of the reasons why he is still as popular as he is today, because we used to call him the constituency president because, it wasn't a letter he wouldn't write, it wasn't a phone call he wouldn't make, it wasn't anything that he wouldn't do. And it was always because he stayed people-focused. And
putting people first.
It was not just a slogan. It was really something that was incredibly important to him. And so our job was to make sure he stayed on the political affairs side, make sure he stayed connected to the people that had actually helped get him elected. For the Office of Public Liaison, that was more, nonpartisan. We brought in Republicans, Democrats, every constituency from every walk of life. And that was actually a wonderful job, too, because that job was front line and front center, making sure that whether you were a farmer, whether you were a woman, whether you were black, whether you were brown, you really understood what the president was trying to communicate. It was also the first line of defense because if they didn't like it, you would hear it. I told another story upstairs, Craig, and you would remember this, Bob. The president wanted to go to celebrate Reverend Joseph Lowry, his birthday, famed civil rights leader. He just wanted to go. Now, you're talking about taking Air Force One up in the air, all of the assets moving for this birthday party. It was so incredibly important to him. So they get him to this party, Reverend Lowry, thrilled. The very next day, the headline reads, "Joseph Lowry criticizes the president on his crime bill," or something. And the president called me and Ben Johnson into the office, and he threw the paper And we're like, we didn't tell you to go. You wanted
Yeah,
to
exactly.
go. You the one wanted to go. But
You didn't really say that. You said you were just smiling. And
yeah, well, I mean, we couldn't say that, of course. But we were thinking it
In your
when me and
head,
Ben
yeah.
walked out the office, we said, "Nah, we told him not to go." But we couldn't tell him that. But that, to me, again, symbolizes just how critical his relationships were to him. And he probably knew that Reverend Lowry didn't particularly care, 'cause I'm sure Reverend Lowry pulled him up in a corner somewhere at the birthday party
I'm
and
sure.
told him. But he took his, he still took his relationship serious. And those two offices really helped keep him connected.
And you bring up Reverend Lowry, and that reminds me what a deep connection President Clinton had with the faith community.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with African-American ministers and with, his churches here. And really, like, the faith community was really important to him.
Yeah.
And Carol did such a wonderful job keeping him connected to those folks. And I think about Carol Willis all the time. He made such an impact.
See, the thing that, and I look at this now as I look at some of our potential presidential candidates and folks that have, and I also put President Biden in this category as well. They had a foundation. When President Clinton came to Washington, he didn't come by himself. He came with Miss Lottie, he came with Miss Janice, he came with Craig, he came with Bob, he came with Carol Willis, he came with Stephanie Streett. He had such a strong foundation until we felt connected to him because we knew them. He had General Clark. I mean, it is something to having people in your own home state connected to you. And that gives you a sense of, oh, okay, this man is, he's not coming up here to build relationships. He's got relationships. And they were his voices, and that's how we became so connected and close to him. And the faith community was just another part of that journey for him. And I tell you, I watch some of the politicians today, and I always think to myself, and these are my terms, not theirs, who are their people? Who's coming with them? Who do they know? I mean, I recently worked for somebody, and the one question I asked was, okay, give us who do you want us to talk to? Who do you want us to connect to? And if they can't give you a name, that's
Red flag.
That's a big red flag. And I can tell you one thing, President Clinton could probably give you a stroll of names. It was not like a name. It was thousands of names, and we were like, okay. But we had to stay in touch with all those people, too.
Oh, yes. I think every Arkansan that somehow were in Washington, I was giving them a West Wing tour, and Janice, but we were all taking them to radio addresses, and
Absolutely.
It was the people's house.
Yeah.
He wanted people that he knew, grew up with, people here to have that experience of coming to the White House, which is one of the reasons we have the exact replica of the Oval Office upstairs, Speaking of folks that worked in the administration, and again, a lot of folks here, a lot of people online, I think it's really interesting that, and I work with a lot of the other presidential foundations who have people that worked in the various administrations, and they always say to me, like, y'all are so crazy. You still are so connected to one another. You all have like this thing. They think it's strange how, like, we won't see someone for 5-10 years, and you pick up and start talking, and it's like you're transported back. It's like nothing has ever passed. Like that bond that I think everyone felt, working so closely in the foxhole. We were all working together. Talk a little about some of the relationships that you formed during that time, and sort of what do you think about that statement about sort of the bond? And
I think we're all still, we're all still really close. And I tell you, if any one of them called me or I called them, I do not feel like I would not get a return call or get the help I needed if I needed help. And I think that is primarily because what you find in the Clinton brand is loyalty, incredible loyalty. And it is something that I believe in, and I have carried with me, not just from the Clinton administration, but I brought it to the administration as well. But there's nothing that can replace being, I feel this so deeply in my soul that if something happened to me, even during the time that my brother and my mother were both very ill, I got calls from the president, I got calls from Secretary Clinton. I mean, at some point you say, okay, I know y'all got something else to do. Y'all don't really have to call all the time. But that's just how deeply they care about you, and you reciprocate that. And I think that's the ethos of all of us who have worked in the administration. And it wasn't all unicorns and roses all the time, you know. But we did have a very, very healthy respect for each other, and we tried to cover for each other. I mean, we sometimes had to cover for each other from the president, right?
Oh, yes. Those were the pre-meetings.
Yes, yes, but I mean, that's what you do. I mean, if you're serving him and you want to serve him to your best, you get together. You don't go into his office arguing with each other. You already have a point of view and you're aligned, and if he doesn't have the same point of view, you hope you can bring him to our side, but most of the time we're usually going to his side, but at least we try to form an opinion before we get there. And I think the fact that we are still so close, I mean, close. And everybody, I tell you, every administration marvels at the fact that the Clintonites, as they call us, are still so close. They cannot believe that we are so loyal to each other. They just can't believe it. But it's just how it is.
Speaking of loyalty to each other, there were a group of women in the White House, and I'm not going to get emotional, but I am going to get emotional because it makes me think of Alexis Herman, who, as we all know, passed away recently. The
Today
stronger
is her birthday. I think today is her birthday.
Is it really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, when you were talking about that loyalty and sort of pre-meetings and being aligned, for me, Alexis was such a mentor, and I know for you she was obviously even going much further back. But, you know, I find it interesting because there were a lot of us that were very, very young and in positions of great sort of, not power, I mean, of authority, and going into these meetings with lots of other people that were much more seasoned and had been around Washington. And so I say all that people like Alexis, people like Lottie Shackelford took those of us, the young ones, under their wings to help us, you know, get some confidence to, you know, before going into a meeting in the cabinet room with, you know, the national security team and cabinet members, you know, making presentations, would sort of practice with us and help us sort of role play what we were going to be doing, and in backing each other up. I can't tell you how many times we would be in a meeting and, you know, one of us would say something and, you know, people just kind of, okay, whatever. And then let's say Bob Nash comes up 3 minutes later and says the same thing. And it's like, oh, Bob, what a great idea. That's so awesome. I'm so glad you thought of that. But then you'd have Alexis at the table would say, that is a great idea. Stephanie, I'm so glad that you were able to present that. You know, just sort of like that sort of having each other's back. Like that was such an important part of that sort of camaraderie. And Bob, I'm joking. Like that was not Bob. Bob would never do that. But there were people, you know, that might do that inadvertently, which is almost worse, you know?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about some of the mentors maybe that you had in your life? I know there are a lot of women that have been mentors to you and any other folks like in the White House that are still people today that you go to for counsel.
Well, I actually want to tell two quick stories. I want to tell one about Vernon Jordan, who I know is very important to the president. So when I first got asked to come to the White House, which, by the way, I decided that working at the DNC was better than going to the White House, and I turned the job down twice. And my mother was like, okay, something I did wrong with this girl. But
what is wrong with her?
Yeah. But anyway, after I finally decided to take the job, Vernon called me over to his office. You know, he was like the wise counsel, and he was really good at mentoring us as well. And he said these words to me, and I still live by them today. He said, I want you to understand, you're going to be in a position to give the President of the United States, the First Lady, the Second Lady, and the Vice President your advice. what you have to do is make sure you're prepared, you have done all of the necessary work to make sure that you give them good advice. But you remember one thing, it is only your advice. Don't get wedded to your advice. Give your advice and walk away from it. So often, as young people, we think our advice is the only advice. But in the end, the weight of the pen was on the president or one of those principals. And so every time I decided that I had something brilliant to say and wanted to get wedded to it, then I would think about Vernon Jordan, who was, I mean, he probably has mentored so many people in this room, and he was incredibly just skillful at doing that. I was fortunate when I came through, I had the privilege of being mentored by Coretta Scott King, Betty Shabazz, Dr. Maya Angelou, all the ladies that you read about. They were my personal mentors, and that's because I belonged to a group because of my mentor, Reverend Willie Barrow. She used to take me to what was called the Family Leadership Retreat. And I tell you, what happened, I think when you're around that wisdom and those souls, what you learn is what they had was a value system that you can't trade in, and you can't trade up on it. And so everywhere I go, I would see them, I would hear them saying something, and it would always draw me back to what is your values? What do you really care about? What do you believe is important? And so I never really got off center. Alexis Herman was the same way. You know, she'd always, you know, if you got too hoity-toity, she'd always just stop you and say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Are you doing this for the right reason? I mean, this is just an example, but are you doing it for the right reason? Are you asking the right questions? Are you making sure that this will not impact the president? You know, the thing that scared me most about working at the White House was the power of the White House. I mean, as we have witnessed, with the stroke of a pen, you can change a person's life. And I am so grateful that I work for a president that understood the power of that pen, not just executive orders. He had legislation that was being passed, but understood the power of that. And that's because we had great people before we got there telling us, okay, this is not just about you working at a White House. This is not a title. You are about to change someone's life, and you better be very serious about it. So I was actually probably happy when the administration ended, because I wanted my life back. I wanted to be free. I didn't want to have to worry about upsetting anyone.
And how did that turn out?
I only went back for a couple of months to another administration.
Wow. You know, you talked about feeling so blessed to be able to serve in these roles. Working in the White House and working in the administration was a pretty heady experience. You had opportunities to witness history firsthand and to be part of such amazing moments that you probably could never dream of. Can you share maybe a couple of your most fond memories of things that you were able to do or be a part of that had a deep impact on you?
Gosh, it was so many things. I tell you, one of the funniest fond memories I had is when we left Bob in one of them countries in Africa.
What? I don't think I've heard this one.
It was so pitiful. We left him. I'm like, they're going to actually, where were you? Where did they leave you, Bob? When we were in, because President was doing this 6-country tour, and poor Bob, I don't know where he was, but he got left. The trip was incredible, but the thing I remember most is we left poor Bob somewhere stranded. But that's, you know.
Did he ever get caught back up?
Yeah, he got caught back up.
Okay.
They've you know, that's when you got all the Walker and all them. They caught him back up.
And, yeah.
But he got left.
Wow.
He really got left. So that was a beautiful thing. The other thing, I'm sorry,
but that
Bob.
trip, that trip was historic.
This trip was
Talk
beautiful.
about that
but
trip.
The trip,
Yeah.
I mean, listen, weren't you on the trip?
No, I scheduled it. I stayed back.
I mean, gosh. I mean, listen, where were we in? Was it Ghana? Or where was it where he had?
Ghana had over 1 million people.
Yes.
President Jerry Rawlings.
Yes. But, you know, just like he does with the Clinton Global Initiative, The president always wants to have deliverables. He just doesn't want to just show up. So, I mean, he transformed Africa. You know, all the Johnny-come-latelys now talking about, oh, we're going to Africa. I'm like, oh, been there, done that already. And the president really, actually, really respected the leaders. He didn't ask them if they spoke, what they speak. I'm just saying, I'm just saying. He just,
This is off the record, folks.
Yeah.
This is, remember, that's what this is
just
called.
understood, you know. And so that trip was historic in itself. The other person, we couldn't wake up. Since this is off the record, we couldn't wake Alexis Herman up. She had decided that, you know, okay, I just need to sleep so my body, because she had the first bilat. And so when we landed in, what was the first one? Was it, I can't
remember.
It might have been Rwanda. When we landed, we were like, Alexis, wake up. It's time to get up. We got to get off this plane. We got to get you together. It was a hot mess. We could not wake her up to save my soul. And then we took her to the Peggy Lewis. She took her to the ladies' room.
Fluffed her hair up and, yeah.
We left Bob. We couldn't wake up. Something was going on that Africa trip that just wasn't working.
A-team.
But anyway, it was fun. We got her up, and she was brilliant as always.
Yeah.
She was completely brilliant. That was a wonderful thing. And then I got the opportunity to, when President Mandela came to visit. So this was an interesting thing. So, you know, at this point, you know, everybody wants to know what everybody is talking about. So they dispatched me to go around the city of Washington to figure out if I can meet up with the Mandela folks to figure out what he's going to be saying that night. And so I go from event to event to event, and I couldn't nobody knew what Mr. Mandela was going to say. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to get fired. I'm coming back to this White House. I have no clue what he's going to say. He's just such a gracious leader. He could say anything. The world is going to fall in, and we're the problem. I don't know. And so when I got back to the White House, and I think it was Erskine at the time, I went to Erskine's office. They said, so did you get his remarks? And I'm like, no, sir. Do you know what he's going to say? No, sir. Okay, so maybe we'll do a pre-brief. I said, okay. So he said, we can just walk through the logistics. So I was so incredibly nervous. Imagine trying to brief Mr. Mandela, brief President Clinton, try to brief the First Ladies. Well, I did very well briefing President Mandela and President Clinton. And then the First Ladies looked at me and said, do you want us to do anything? I forgot about them totally. I was so nervous. I couldn't even think about what they should be saying.
Did Capricia rescue you? Or?
No one rescued me.
Oh, no.
No one. And I just apologized and fell on the sword and say, I'm so sorry, this is your role, and blah, 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 blah. But that was a very important moment. See, all my moments are like comical, but yet historical.
That's right. Let's kind of flip it on its head. You
haven't flipped it on its
No,
head?
well, no. Talk about some of your most challenging moments. Is there a day or something that happened that really challenged you as a leader, as a person, that you had to talk about that, if you remember anything? There's probably a lot of those, too. It's hard to choose.
Yeah. You know, this one was kind of challenging because I felt like I was really not in it was just totally above my pay grade. So I get a call from Mrs. Coretta King. She goes, daughter, I need you to go and tell the president I want him to open up Martin's file. So this is during the time when you had phones. So I'm like, first of all, you just don't go to the president's office, but you can't tell her that, you know, because you want to act like you got some juice. So I'm sitting there saying, okay, ma'am, I'll call you back. So I literally had to sit with that for a second, or more than a second, and I'm like, well, I cannot tell her I couldn't do it. I got to at least say that I took it somewhere. So I actually did go to the chief of staff's office, And I said to him, listen, I have no idea what to do with this. I don't even know what it means. I don't know what it means for the government to do this, but this is what Mrs. King has asked. And to Urston's credit, he took it to the president, and the president did reopen the files. Now, I looked like a complete hero, but I was scared. I was like, I couldn't, and I didn't have nothing to do with it. All I did was have the courage not to let it sit in my office. But that was one of the scariest things I think I had ever done, because she really thought I had the power to just go and say, hey, Mr. President, you need to open these files, and I didn't have no power, none whatsoever.
Or know what she was even asking.
No, I had no idea.
Wow. Let's push forward a little bit. You've had your time at the White House, you were Dewey Square, then Secretary Clinton, or Senator Clinton decides to run for president. I know you advised her in the campaign in both 2008 and in 2016. Can you talk about those experiences, how they differed in between the two campaigns, or anything you'd like to share from those times?
Well, 2008, and, you know, many of the folks here, again, will remember this one because, you know, it was actually very challenging because, you know, when you're running two historic campaigns and you don't really realize you're running two historic campaigns, you got Obama on the one hand and then you had Hillary on the other hand. And one of the things that happened during the campaign, I think it was 2008, they accused our president of race baiting. And thank God, thank God, thank God for character and honesty. But I tell you, if I have one regret, and I think Cheryl Mills would agree with this as well, we should have stood up for the president that moment. But we were so afraid that the race would overpower, which it did anyway, but I got him back because I put it in the book. The truth is, the president did not race bait President Obama, and I say this very openly, but they accused him of doing that. What he did, which really infuriated us, was he went to a church, the pastor asked him, no, the pastor was saying to him, I do not think President Obama, then Senator Obama, can win. The president, our president, argued him down, saying, that is not the way to look at this. Now, here we're supposed to be there for Hillary, by the way. Don't forget, it was his wife running. But he argued this pastor down, saying, this is not the way to look at this. This guy is gifted. You have to open up your eyes and become more, you know. He sold President Obama better than he sold his wife, by the way, Mr. President. And when I came out that meeting, I said to myself, oh my God, he just convinced this pastor to vote for President Obama and not his wife. But it was, I mean, the race thing was so challenging. And again, I say, we should have taken it on, but I recently put it in our book because I wanted to make sure that his name was cleared on that. Because that, if I find anything is far from the truth about race as it relates to this man, that was not true. And I finally got a chance to clear that up. So, you know, that part was hard. I still think that Hillary Clinton would have made the best president of these United States of America. I believe it to my core. And, you know, as fate would have it, maybe it just wasn't her time. I don't know. But I could tell you what, our country would have truly been a different place today. Oh, my God. Whether it's 2008 or 2016, she would have been a spectacular president.
Fast forward to 2016, talk a little bit about that race and some of the challenges or anything from that period that you think would be interesting to share here today.
I mean, you know, it was tough. It was tough. But, you know, listen, she made it to the finish line. And I think these are bigger questions we have to ask ourselves about what does America look for when they're looking at a female, not just a female president, but a female commander-in-chief. That's a different image. That's a different psychology. And I think if we have any disservice we do to women is we don't really do the psychological research around what it really means to put them forth. You can be smart. We've had two capable women, and trust me, the person they've run against is not like, I'm just trying to zip my lip a little bit here. But there's something else going on, and it's more than just misogyny. It's more than sexism. It is a mind shift, and we have to really prepare for a woman presidency. And I think both of them may have been before their time. I don't know. But I tell you one thing. I know Hillary Clinton this country would be looking far different today.
You also had a really close relationship with Vice President Harris.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how you came to know her and how that relationship evolved and what your kind of role was this last cycle.
Yeah. I met Vice President Harris when she was running for DA. Me and a young woman, one of our former colleagues, Ann Walker and Jim Johnson, hosted her first fundraiser in Washington. And we just stayed in touch. And I knew at that time when I saw her speak for the first time, I said, oh, she's got something. She's going places. And, so we remained close, as she became senator and, AG. And, she's an incredibly gifted individual. And, who knows what her future will be. People speculate she might run for governor. People speculate she might not do anything. Who knows? But the fact is, I think she's a very gifted person. And, again, I think our country would have been better served if we had either one of these ladies. And I still look forward to having a female president, by the way.
Yes, we all do. Minyon, you've had such an incredible track record serving as sort of a whisperer, confidential senior advisor to so many important people. Probably one of the most recent I find fascinating is your role in overseeing Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearings. Talk a little bit about what you did on that team and talk about how you got to know her. What is she like? What an incredible person, but what an incredible job you had.
I tell you the truth, I have never witnessed a person with such depth and such character. And when a person know who they are, this woman is so clear about who she is, and she is so smart. But to go backwards, I get a call from somebody over at the White House saying, hey, listen, we're putting together this team. It was Doug Jones, and who was the other one? It was the third one. I can't think of his name. Oh, God, he'd kill me if I didn't know his name. I hope you're not watching. I'm sorry.
Somebody
But anyway,
Google.
it was three of us.
Yeah.
And so they wanted me to build the public support for her on the outside. So I decide to go back they have what is called special government employee status. So I went back for 4 months. It was 4 months just to help shepherd the nomination through. And one of the things that I was struck by when we did our first Oval Office meeting with President Biden, that's before he had decided on Justice Jackson. He was going around the room asking people, what did they think? And then he looked at me and said, and I bet not lose this. And I'm like, well, I just got here. I mean, don't you have a Ledge Affairs office? Is somebody counting the votes up there in the Senate? I mean, that would not be my job. But I'm saying to myself, oh my God, does he think I can do this by myself? I can't do this by myself. But anyway, so we get there, and there was such overwhelming support for her on the outside until it actually helped propel her forward. And it was an incredible, I tell you, if I have anything that I am most proud of is to work for President Biden during that particular time, because it wasn't easy. I mean, you all saw the hearings. I mean, those guys up there, they were coming for.
There was a different day than it was 30 years ago.
And the thing about these new senators, Holly and all of them, they're smart guys. They're not dumb. They're not dumb at all. And, she said one day in one of our briefings, she said, because, they were grilling her, how they do the murder boards. And she said, well, surely they're not going to be this bad, are they? And we all looked at each other and said, whoa, that's naive. Oh, yeah, they're going to be that bad and worse.
more.
Yeah, but I will tell you she's now, she's almost like the lone voice up there, and I feel for her, but she's incredibly talented, and she's going to hold her own, and she's not going to be shifting with the wind, and she doesn't take kindly to fear or favor. She's going to state exactly what she believes the law is, whether they like it or not.
That's reassuring to know that there still are people.
Yeah, she's great.
Like her. Let's go a little bit backwards and talk about your role as the chairwoman of the Democratic National Convention last time. Obviously, you started in that role, and President Biden was the nominee, and things were running along. And then all of a sudden, this never happened before. He decided to step away, and Vice President Harris was now the nominee. How on earth were you able to do, watching from the outside, it seemed like a pretty seamless transition. It just seemed to sort of rolled into the other. Talk about that. How did you get your staff prepared? How did you guys deal with that? Like, wow, what a shock.
Well, I should just say this and get it off my chest. First of all, what happened to President Biden, I felt was unfortunate. I have a real healthy respect for him. And, I'm glad he came to his own decision when he decided he wanted to step away from it. And, for whatever reason, I just didn't think we should be in the business of, just piling on the way we did. So I have to say that as a preface. The thing about a convention is there's a couple of things that happen with a convention. One is logistics, one is production, which is the big program that everybody saw, and the other is just politics. And what was happening before the switch had absolutely nothing to do with the switch. At the time, what Chicago was faced with was the migrants. Governor Abbott was sending busloads in. You're talking about a switch. We had a switch from the mayor who actually advocated for the convention,
right?
Lori. She lost, and then we ended up with a new mayor, and he was, very young, had not, this was just way above his pay grade, and he was trying to get his city on track, but we also had a governor who really doubled down and really helped us. But the other thing that was happening, and I have to thank a lot of the historians for helping me through this, is they were trying to paint Chicago as 1968. So we were meeting with, at least I was meeting with historians. I was making sure that we had accurate messaging out there if in the event that, something just wild happened, which we didn't anticipate, but we had to get prepared for it. So I pulled together, in addition to the historians, I pulled together a smaller committee. It was called the What If Committee, and that's the only thing I will give Jake Tapper credit for in his book, is because I pushed back on him a little bit because he really wanted to write the committee as though we put the committee together for President Biden, but it had nothing to do with him. We were just dealing with so many things, and I just needed a bunch of smart people to help me think it through. But anyway, so we get there then on July 21st at 1:30. I'm on a Zoom call with the Vice President's staff, preparing her for the vice presidential nomination. I get a call on my phone saying, from a young man, Quentin, he says, I can now say his name, saying the president is about to step down. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what are you saying? So I'm trying to pay attention to the Zoom and then pay attention to him. He says, yeah, but he was
calm.
He wasn't calm. He didn't have enough information. I'm like, well, when? Well, I don't know. Well, how? Well, I don't know. So then he calls me back. And I said, well, you got to get more information. If you just trying to just give me a little heads up here, that's not enough. So he calls me back. He says, I think he's going to release a statement. And I'm like, a statement to who? And he's like, I think he's going to do it on the internet. I'm like, oh my God, this is not working out. So by this time, I'm getting nervous and thinking it's really real. So I'm looking at the vice presidential team saying, do they know this is happening? Does anybody know? So I go, Tony, can I talk to you offline for a second? So they're in another room in the vice president's house. I said, can you go see if the vice president has received a call from anyone? And he says, well, what are you talking about? Because, you have to know a lawyer.
Right.
She's a lawyer's lawyer. I'm like, I'm not going to ask her that. You got to give me more info. So I'm giving him the information I have. I'm not going to ask her that. You got to give me. I'm like, dude, go see if the vice president has gotten a call and she knows something is happening. And it was actually simultaneous. By the time I pushed him out to go tell her, she had actually gotten a call. Now, it wasn't hard to, and I don't want to make this look like this was this big grand thing we had to do, because conventions run on autopilot after a while. The only thing that had to really be changed and sized up was the program.
But that's a big part of it.
It's a huge part of it, but you got to remember, it was the Biden-Harris administration. It was not just the Biden administration. So she was already infused. What we had to do was change the program around. We had to make sure we had people that reflected her core values, make sure we had people that she knew, which we still had a month to do. And we had incredibly gifted people like Ricky Kirshner, all of the bells and whistles that was happening at the convention. This guy by the name of Ricky Kirshner, you see him do Tonys, and he just brilliant, and he made it look all so seamless, and we just get all the credit for it. But it was really him who just made it beautiful. And all we had to do was infuse her into it. And yes, it was tough. Yes, it was getting the staff acclimated. The biggest challenge was just all the material.
Yeah.
That was the thing. We had to find what do you call them, the speedy printers?
Speedy union printers? Yeah.
Exactly. That was the biggest challenge, making sure we could get the material in place. And knock on wood, it all turned out okay. But it was still, it was bittersweet. Wonderful, wonderful convention, but it was still bittersweet. I will tell you the other thing that I think we made a mistake on is we overprogrammed the first night, and it caused Biden to come on way too late.
Yeah.
And I just, I regret that to this day, way too late.
Well, Minyon, you have led quite an incredible life.
Did I tell any secrets out here?
You gave us some good stuff. You did. You gave us some things that I'd never heard before. But one thing about Minyon, as you could see tonight through this program, she always gives credit to everyone else, because that is the type of leader she is. That is the type of human. Those are her values, to always bring a chair to the table for someone who's standing outside the room. I admire so much, Minyon. You've been a mentor and a role model to me, to so many young women in politics today, and just want to thank you for coming back to Little Rock to share your story with our audience here tonight. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all watching enjoyed this as much as I did, and you are such a great friend, and I just love you. I love you.
Thank you, Stephanie. This has been great.
Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed it.